Ho so Mawani Wiak on Mani Jones, Mokiman Nuiswan, Kakano Homo Ko Owasa, O Matnamane Nuiswan, O Matnamane Natawam, Nato Matnamane Wakeness and Manawich, Owasa Natotam, Nakia Joan Lord, Kasitna Anexki Wakian. Hello, everyone. My English name is Annie Jones, and my Menominee name is Kakanohomoako Owasa, which means bear who teaches. And I am Menominee, and I'm learning to speak Menominee a little bit. And I am from the Bear Clan Menominee. And my mother is Joan Lord, and she lives in Kashina, Wisconsin. So it's really lovely to be with all of you here today. I'm going to get started with the presentation, and I'll just let you know that I'll do my best to monitor chat, and I welcome any questions that you have. So if you want to open up your microphone and ask questions, that would be great. And if I'm missing something in chat, if people will let me know that too, that would be wonderful. And I'll go ahead and get started here. Let's see. Now, all of a sudden, it doesn't want me to optimize for a video clip, but I see. But we'll hope for the best later. All right. Everybody see the screen okay? And I'm gonna bring my chat up and move it over here. Are there any pesky text boxes in your way or anything like that? We're good to go. All right. So I'm an organization development and tribal nation specialist with the University of Wisconsin Extension. I'm also affiliate faculty with community and environmental sociology, where I'm housed in Egg Hall on the UW-Madison campus, and also American Indian and Indigenous studies. So very lovely to be with all of you here today. And we are going to be doing a little bit of an introduction of Wisconsin's First Nations, and also exploring some Indigenous ways of knowing and an Indigenous worldview, and hopefully practicing with some of those cultural ways of knowing that also influence who you are and how you see the world. And throughout the presentation today, I may use some words interchangeably. So you may hear me say things like tribe or nation or Indigenous or Native American. We also have clans and bands and things like that. So this is by way of saying that I would love for you to be comfortable with asking me any questions. I would much rather you ask here in this environment than maybe being out in the wild and wondering about what words to use and if things are appropriate or not. So I welcome any questions that you may have. You may most often will hear people say Native American. I always think that's probably the safest choice to make. In Canada, people say Indigenous. In Australia, you'll hear Aboriginal, and all of them kind of point to the same Indigenous background. And you'll also hear Native Americans refer to themselves frequently as Indian or American Indian. And that's because we use that as our census designation. So when we're filling out forms every 10 years, we have the opportunity to check off our backgrounds, and it says American Indian, Alaskan Native, or Native Hawaiian as a way to check that off. So it doesn't actually say Native American on the census. And you'll hear us often refer to newsletters like Indian Country or As Indians. I think for non-Native Americans, go with Native American typically. The story of Native Americans in Wisconsin and in the United States, of course, begins with land dispossession. So here we have a map of when treaties began in 1809 through the 1800s and today. So those blue areas are Native American homelands, and red, the current Native American trust lands and reservations. There are probably, if we did a close-up of Wisconsin, there would be many speckled kinds of areas of different trust lands that Native American tribes in Wisconsin have. And today there are 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. So you'll see many of these areas here in Wisconsin. Wisconsin actually has the greatest number of tribes east of the Mississippi. Michigan is a close second. You'll see some here in Maine as well. And what it means to be federally recognized is that we have sovereignty. And sovereignty is hard fought for legal designation that we is challenged almost on a daily basis. So tribal sovereignty means that we have the absolute right to be able to govern ourselves, and that's why it's really important for tribes to be federally recognized. Here we have a photograph of some Menominee fighting for restoration. The Menominee in December celebrated the 50th anniversary of restoration. So in the Eisenhower administration, the federal government wanted to conduct an experiment and terminate tribes, and they selected the Menominee and a tribe in California, thinking that they were economically stable enough to try for termination. And it was pretty disastrous for the Menominee people. They had a difficult time raising funds and ended up selling off much of their land. So if you've heard of the Legend Lake area, that's where much of that land was sold. And you've probably also heard of Ada Deer. Ada Deer and my mom are the same age. Ada Deer passed away last year, and Ada Deer led a movement called Determination Rights Unity for Menominee Sovereignty, along with many other Menominee fighting for restoration. And in the Nixon administration, they were successful in their argument to end. Richard Nixon restored tribal sovereignty to the Menominee people. So it's been 50 years. And that's why in Menominee, we're both a reservation and a county with nearly coterminous boundaries. Doing okay so far? Any questions? All right. I like to dedicate all of my presentations to boarding school survivors, and especially on a day like Valentine's Day, I want to show some love to not only my ancestors, but to all of our ancestors who went through hardships and long journeys to be where we are today, and to have us in our seats and learning today. Every single Native American that you meet has been impacted by boarding schools and the boarding school era. So whether it's, the Native American that you meet themselves have been to a boarding school, or perhaps a parent, grandparent, or extended family member. I'm of the age old enough to have gone to a boarding school. Fortunately, I didn't go to a boarding school, but my mom did. And they endured many hardships, and lots of little children didn't come home. And so I like to honor my ancestors, my mom, who wasn't able to learn to speak Menominee, and my grandmother, who was afraid to let her children learn to speak Menominee. I honor them by introducing myself in Menominee and learning the language. So I've been working at learning the language now for, I guess it will be 4 years. I think we started during the pandemic. And I attend online classes with Menominee U. It's a nonprofit organization on the reservation. And I have been fortunate enough to be able to audit some classes on the UW-Madison campus. UW-Madison offers 6 Indigenous languages, including Menominee, and anybody can take those. So if you're of an age to be able to audit classes, many of those language classes are offered online, and you can also take those. Termination, treaty policies, the Dawes Act, the Morrill Act, which established the land-grant university system. Boarding schools all had really profound impact on Native American population, as illustrated by this graph. So pre-Columbus contact in 1491, it was estimated that the Native American population or indigenous population in what we now call the United States would have been about 6 million. And you can see the impact that policies had on the population between 1900 in the 1900s through about 1960 when the boarding school era ended, or actually in the 1970s when it ended. Population was estimated to be about 237,000 according to census records. And now a bit of a resurgence with recorded 4.3 million on the latest census. And these numbers may not be completely accurate. So we have a good reason to guess at the 6 million in 1491. However, the New York Times wrote an article recently and called into question Native American population statistics during this era between 1900s and present. So there's good reason to believe that people, because of the boarding school era and other reasons, would have underreported themselves as being Native American. And so they may have chosen to try to pass as white if they were able to pass as white. Many of them moving into urban areas for work, hiding their children from going off to boarding schools. And again, evidence shows that there was some underreporting. And today there's maybe it's not so much of a baby boom on reservations. I know quite a few Native Americans, of course, and I think that they have children at the same rate as everybody else does. But it could be that people are now reporting where perhaps they wouldn't have in the past. And on the census, people are able to now choose one or more races. So they may choose Native American and something else. They may have heard of some Native American lineage and may be reporting for those reasons. So slide is just to illustrate how those Indian removal policies impacted our population. Here in Wisconsin, we have 12 Native American tribes. 11 of those are federally recognized. And we have one tribe, Brotherton, in the Fond du Lac area that has been fighting to have their federal recognition restored. And they had their tribal status taken from them before Wisconsin even became a state. And the reason that it was taken from them was because they refused to move for a 6th time. So Brotherton, like the Oneida, and Stockbridge-Munsee are three tribes that come to Wisconsin from the Northeast, mostly the upstate New York area. There's still an Oneida tribe of New York. And the Brotherton had been moved several times, kept being moved further west, and they said, no, we're going to stay here. And the state, again, before it was even a state, said, well, you can stay here, but you're no longer going to be federally recognized as a tribe. You're just going to be citizens of the state that would become Wisconsin. So still fighting for their recognition to be restored. These shaded areas for Ojibwe and Dakota and Ho-Chunk and Potawatomi, Menominee, Potawatomi down here are the areas when they began to draw up treaties that were kind of divided up. So there would have been a lot of movement among tribes and throughout the state and crossing state lines, of course, because we all know that state county lines are artificial boundaries, treaty boundaries are artificial boundaries as well. But it's safe to say if you're able to find your location on the map here that these are some general areas that you can say were ancestral lands of the Menominee or the Ho-Chunk. I always like to point out that the county that has the greatest population of Native Americans is actually Milwaukee County. And again, these go back to policies that are designed to eradicate, reduce, move Native Americans from their homelands or boarding school policies that make it more desirable to move off of the reservation. And economic policies. So on reservations are really restricted as to the type of economic activity that they can have on the reservation or economic development that they can have. And so frequently people need to move to find work. And urban Indians are therefore the greatest number of Native Americans that you'll find. Menominee, for instance, have an enrollment number. Enrolled means that you meet the blood quantum in order to be considered an enrolled tribal member. Menominee have about almost 10,000 enrolled Menominees and a tribal population on the reservation itself of about 4,500. So about half of all Menominee live off of the reservation, half live on the reservation. And I would consider myself to be an urban Indian. So I was born in O'Connell Falls, just outside of the Menominee Reservation. And my mom lives on the Menominee Reservation now. But when my dad died when I was young, we moved to Kenosha to be closer to a sister who lived in Kenosha. So I've not actually ever lived on the reservation myself. So Milwaukee County with the greatest population, followed by Brown County and Dane County. So quite a few urban Indians living here in Dane County where I live too, primarily made up of Ho-Chunk. So I'm on Ho-Chunk ancestral lands here in Madison. So on behalf of the Ho-Chunk, I say Yini Karagiwi, and that means I greet you all. And the Ho-Chunk have lived in this Four Lakes region of Madison and Dane County since time immemorial, at time before memory. There are three different language groups here in Wisconsin. Menominee, that I am, along with Potawatomi and Ojibwe, belong to the Algonquin language group. And the Ho-Chunk belong to the Siouan language family. And then we have those tribes from out east that belong to the Iroquoian language family. And 6 different Indigenous languages to go along with the language families. And I find it really interesting because the Menominee have their origin story at around Marinette, at the mouth of the river there, and Ho-Chunk have their origin story at the mouth of Green Bay. And so really close proximity, but the Ho-Chunk have more of a Siouan language influence from out west Minnesota, and we're more closely affiliated with the language families of these northern tribes of Ojibwe, northern tribes and bands. So we're going to get into talking a little bit about Indigenous ways of knowing and cultural ways of knowing. And I was interested in, when you think of Wisconsin, what are some words that spring to mind? Do you have any characteristics that you would use to describe Wisconsin and the culture of Wisconsin? And you can put those in the chat. I can see the chat now, or you can open up your mic and say something too. Lakes and forests, agriculture. Lots of lakes. You're missing the big 3 that I often hear. Cheese is one of them. Dairy, definitely. Still the dairy state. Lumber in the north, yes. Beer, that's my second of the big 3. Rice and cranberries, hardworking, stoic. I often hear Midwest nice. Green Bay Packers, real Packer culture and sports culture. And I see that I missed a question up above too, and that's about the Fond du Lac tribe. I believe the Fond du Lac tribe are a Minnesotan tribe. But yes, lots of Fond du Lac tribal members living in the Superior, Duluth area. And I believe that they're a Minnesota tribe. Okay, how about, whoopsie daisy, there we go. How about the place where you were raised and where you reside now? If you want to put in chat, maybe where either where you were raised or where you live now. What's the culture of the place where you are? So if I were to describe Dane County, where I live now, I'm going with sports probably. Driftless, now in Madison, rural, farming focused, tourism. We have a rural person now in Milwaukee, forest land, still farming, disappearing family farms. Yep. All right, so a strong agricultural background here among the people online today. Gentrification, paper industry. All right, tourism, lakes. So all of these ways of knowing about Wisconsin and what springs to mind when we think of Wisconsin is relatively new. So when we think, when our picture of Wisconsin is really new. The state celebrated its 175th anniversary last year, and the university is in the process of, it's a year-long celebration. So we started in the fall and we're continuing on throughout the year. But we know that humans have inhabited what we now call Wisconsin for at least 14,000 years, or about 13,500 in the Madison area. So where I'm from in Kenosha, do I have any Kenoshaans online here? Where I'm from in Kenosha, if you visit the Kenosha Public Museum, you'll have the opportunity to see fully reassembled mammoth who was found in a farm field in Kenosha County. And we know that it's dates back to 14,000 years because the tool markings on the woolly mammoth date back 14,000 years. In here on campus at UW-Madison, we have artifacts from in the form of flints and stone cherts that were used to make tools that date back about 13,500 years. So this slice of what we think of as Wisconsin is really just kind of like a breeze in time. And that 14,000 year timeline is also impacted by glaciation. So that really impacts our ability to be able to date human habitation, with many people saying that it goes on well beyond the 14,000 years. So you'll hear Native Americans in Wisconsin and in other places saying since time immemorial, time before memory. So what was that culture like here before statehood, before settlers came into the area to live? And French explorers explored Green Bay and other areas as they traveled through the state. It was a beautiful oak savanna where bison and other animals that are now extinct or nearly extinct, carrier pigeons, would have been roaming the landscape. For those of you who know about oak savannas take quite a lot of care. It's a manufactured environment with controlled burns. So we think of, controlled burns as something being kind of a newer practice, but Native Americans have been practicing controlled burns for quite some time. And also lots of farms. We often think of Native Americans as being hunters and gatherers moving throughout the state, and that's true. They would have had winter camps and summer camps and winter lodging and summer lodging. But they also had garden beds. There's a really large garden bed that's found in Sauk County, about 300 acres of Hulbert Creek garden bed, and that would have been a real center of economic activity. And in Menominee, there are garden beds as well. And so some pretty sophisticated gardening practices, or what we think of as kind of like new today. We, as Menominee, would have been farming in forest, really forested, shaded environment, and also cover crops. So farm erosion, field erosion really began to occur as we began to till crops. So many people, many farmers are moving towards cover crops now to avoid soil erosion, and that's something that the Native Americans had been practicing for a long time. Fish farming, certainly Lac du Flambeau, Lake of the Torches, named for their spearfishing. I don't know as much about whether there were formal fish farms. I haven't heard as much about that. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It just isn't in my isn't my background of knowing about what was going on in the state. I am sure that there are others. And wild rice beds. So the lakes in Wisconsin would have had lots of wild rice and maple syruping, of course, but the lakes now, especially in this area, there were wild rice beds on Lake Mendota, for instance, and the lake has a lot of nitrogen in it and wouldn't support wild rice anymore. But there are often attempts to reintroduce wild rice to the lakes in this area. You found a rock on your farm. Do you think this has tribal connections? Potentially, I think it would need to be tested though to really know.
I have a picture of it, but I don't know how to get it to you.
Okay.
I can hold it up.
Oh, really cool. Really cool. Um, so when we start to think about Indigenous ways of knowing, I for me at least, I don't know if this works for everybody, but when I think about reorienting myself into more of an Indigenous way of thinking about the world or knowing about the world, I like to look at this Ojibwe map of place names and orienting ourselves towards the east. So we know that many ancient cultures have oriented themselves towards the east, and that's because the sun rises in the east, and they would have placed their doors and openings out into the world facing east to get that morning sunlight. And graves are another tombstones. If we look at headstones in graves, they're often oriented towards the east, and that's because we are taught that when the resurrection comes, Jesus will come toward from the east, and people will rise from the dead, and so they are oriented east so that they're rising up and to be able to face Jesus. And the compass begins to orient us towards the north. But this really subtle shift in the way of looking at the world and kind of turning things on its head is helpful to begin to like shift my mind to understanding some Indigenous ways of knowing as well. Um, could I explain Anishinaabe? Can you say a little bit more about explaining Anishinaabe? Anishinaabe out, Mary Lou, maybe this is what you're going for, and if not, chime in, open up your mic and chime in. Anishinaabe is what Ojibwe people will call themselves. They're Anishinaabe, Nish, you'll hear, and Menominee kind of include themselves in that group, but it's more of an Ojibwe way of referring to themselves. And I think that it's a word that means ancient. Menominee is, for instance, not our actual name for ourselves. That's given to us by the Ojibwe, whose word for wild rice meat is Menumin. So French explorers hear that and uh, begin to say Menominee, or people of the wild rice. Our name for ourselves is the ancient ones. Ho-Chunk, um, um, had changed their name back to their original name because they were referred to by white explorers as Winnebago. So Ojibwe, these are names that other people refer to tribes as, and Ojibwe people refer to themselves as Anishinaabe. Does that help? All right. In Dane County, all right, it's yes, an inclusive term for multiple tribes. So the Ojibwe have um, multiple tribes and bands. If I go back to um, Bad River is Ojibwe, Red Cliff is Ojibwe, Lecoutere is Ojibwe, St. Croix is Ojibwe, Forest County, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, Mole Lake is Ojibwe. These are all Ojibwe tribes, different in different bands. Bad River Band of the Ojibwe Indians, Lecoutere Band of Ojibwe Indians. So it's, yes, I would say inclusive. Um, Dane County is said at UW-Madison is said to be the most culturally significant campus in the United States. And Wisconsin is very archaeologically significant because of the number of mounds that have been found here. This map actually kind of makes me laugh because I mean, obviously, I know they're looking at the number of mounds and they're putting the dots there. So, but of course, when they're building the mounds, the mound builders of 1200, 3000 years ago are not looking at current county lines. So it kind of always makes me giggle. Menominee County, for instance, there are a lot of mounds found here. That's probably because the soil and earth is a bit more undisturbed than it is in surrounding areas that have a lot of agriculture in them. And it's amazing to me that so many mounds still exist here in Dane County and in southwest Wisconsin along the Mississippi River. And just in the Four Lakes area alone, estimated to have been about 1,200 mounds, 20,000 mounds in Wisconsin. And mounds are linear, conical, and effigy mounds. So the linear, long, and conical, round mounds date back to about 3,000 years ago. And effigy mounds date back to about 1,200 years ago. All effigy mounds are burial mounds. Most linear and conical mounds are burial mounds, and some of them just have some astronomical significance. The linear and conical burial mounds may contain more than one body. Most effigy mounds contain only one body. You may have heard in the news about the canoes that were brought out of Lake Mendota in the past couple of years. It's interesting to me that those mounds date back to about the ages of the canoes that were brought out of Lake Mendota as well. So the first mound or the first canoe that they brought out of Lake Mendota was much to their amazement dated to 1,200 years ago, which coincides with the effigy mound builders. And then the next year they brought out another canoe. And again, they were shocked and astonished when it dated back to 3,000 years ago. So aligning with the linear and conical mound builders. It's really interesting to think about time, isn't it? Because those 1,200-year-old canoes are closer to us in time than the 3,000-year-old canoes are to the 1,200-year-old canoes. So again, I just kind of like I'm constantly reminding myself that we're just one of many, and I think of the trials and tribulations and the survival that has occurred among Native American people and all of the people in Wisconsin who emigrated here from other countries, and that ocean voyage and coming here with pennies in their pocket and building a new life and a new home here. Our ancestors, again, want to show them some love today on Valentine's Day. Went through so much so that we could be here today. I also want to mention that my family here in the Oconto Falls area is Swedish. So I love both of my grandmothers, now deceased. My grandma Seal, Swedish, and my grandma Mary, who is Menominee. And I love to think that I come from a long line of very strong women. Just these are items that you can Google if you're ever on campus or in the Dane County area and want to see some of these archaeological sites. You can find this map pretty easily through Google. But here we have some burial sites on going out on Picnic Point, and I work in Egg Hall. And that is built on a mound, Bascom. There are 3 different mounds on Bascom with buildings. The first 3 buildings on campus built on mounds. There's a large goose mound over here behind what is now the Baki Recreational Center. You can also go visit the Ho-Chunk clan installation there. So lots of sites to see. Eagle Heights, that's a little bit less accessible than some of the other mounds, but if you are interested and ever want to see the mounds, you can visit campus and see some pretty cool mounds. There's one located behind Agricultural Hall where I am. That is a two-tailed water spirit mound, and it's the only two-tailed water spirit mound. That's one of the Ho-Chunk clans known to exist. There had been a second one in Portage County near Stevens Point, and it's farmfield now. So um, there are people who say that if we were to apply for UNESCO World Heritage status, that we would likely be granted that status because that mound in particular is so rare. Are the canoes on display and where? They are at the Historical Society, Wisconsin State Historical Society on campus, and they're being preserved. So they're in these large chambers filled with an aqueous kind of material. It's gelatinous, and it's getting it preserved and a little bit more solidified, both of them. And I don't know if they'll ever be on display, but I think that if they were to be, it wouldn't be for quite some time because they're still working on preservation. Ho-Chunk, there have been some Ho-Chunk who have been invited in to see the canoes. And Ho-Chunk were invited when that second canoe came out of the water too. Well, the first one, but more Ho-Chunk were invited for the second canoe coming out. Here are some of those mounds on campus. Here's this two-tailed water spirit that I was telling you about behind Egg Hall. This is an older photograph, but if you're familiar with campus, you'll see that this is the backside of Egg Hall where the large lecture hall is. So if you're interested, you can come see that. We do now have um, Wisconsin State Historical Society protection and designation. And so they're in the process of removing some of the sidewalks. This is an older sidewalk that was removed a while ago. And they're going to be removing some of the other sidewalks too, so that people aren't tempted to walk on the mounds. And again, it just amazes me, if you're familiar with Mendota Mental Health Clinic, there is a bird mound, a bird effigy mound that spans 3 football fields. So the amount of earth movement and structure beneath the surface that it has taken for these earthen mounds to survive for that long. And despite colonization, and it just amazes me. I think it's really cool. And it demonstrates to me that this place called Wisconsin, many people say Wisconsin means a beautiful place to live. All of the tribes kind of claim the name Wisconsin, or at least not all of them. Ho-Chunk and Menominee both claim naming of Wisconsin, but all of it, all of those meanings come back to a beautiful place to live. That Dane County and the shores of the Mississippi River were so special to people that they chose to build their mounds here to honor the people in their tribe who were really special to them, much in the same way that today we honor people by naming buildings after them, or, making different dedications to people so that their name or their memory goes off into time. Yep, back of Sanitarium Hill. There are so many mounds in the Madison area that are pretty visible. So if you go to Forest Hill Cemetery, there are mounds there. Um, and also Park Street, there was a dividing ridge. I won't have a good. There was a dividing ridge between Lakes Wingra and Lake Monona in this area that was about 7 stories tall. and it was filled with mounds and artifacts. So this is the main road that kind of brings you into campus. This area was a, 6, 7 story tall, dividing ridge, unglaciated area, and people used it as a road, a transportation route, because it was high up. They could see all around. They could look down into the lakes. They were probably hunting, but they built mounds on the side of this dividing ridge as well. So that as you're walking, effigy mounds are built so that they can be seen from the heavens by spirits, and not so much for as much for human consumption. But this is a way, if they build on the hill and they're walking on this dividing ridge, people are able to walk along and see the mountains below coming up the sides of the hill. And in the early 1800s, as Madison was being built up, this dividing ridge was filled with gravel. And so they excavated the gravel and used it to fill in many parts of Madison. So this isthmus that we think of as Madison right here was not always a clean isthmus. You could certainly cross. It was a land bridge, so to speak, from one side to the other, but there may have been some canoeing in there too to get across. It wasn't a complete land bridge. So they used this dividing ridge, 6 stories of gravel here to fill in the isthmus, State Street, and other parts of Madison. So Charles E. Brown, who was our first state historian, called it Madison's original sin, the destruction of this dividing ridge. They have documentation of artifacts and bones coming out of the soil in the hill as they're excavating and taking that gravel to other places in Madison. And this is illustrated by the original state seal of Wisconsin. I think this is a territorial, no, it's the original state seal. And if you know Latin at all, you'll know that this phrase here means civilization succeeds barbarism. And here we have the barbarian, the so-called barbarian in the center, Native American with feathers and a pipe and a French bow, as it turns out, kind of dressed a little bit more in French garb, looking west on the Mississippi River. And here we begin to see what the state of Wisconsin is valuing in 1836. So this is the original Capitol building. This is obviously not to scale, but here we have on the east Lake Michigan with ships and lighthouse. And on the west, we have the Mississippi River with steamboats and plowing of fields, introducing agriculture. And as our state seals and state flags progress through time, we have miners and other symbols of economy. So I think that state seals do a great job of illustrating the values of a place at any given time. And we can compare that to the seals of the tribes here in Wisconsin, where mostly what you're going to see are some clan animals, wild rice. Wild rice, so important to the St. Croix that they've included it on their seal. We have medicine wheels. We have fire keepers, Forest County fire keepers, feathers. If you think of tobacco as one of our 4 sacred plants, so we have tobacco, sweetgrass, cedar, and sage. And tobacco is what carries prayers up to heaven, and eagle feathers are used to lift those prayers and that smoke up to heaven. And I compare it to like incense in a Catholic church. And other animals, nature, real reverence for nature. So again, seals to me speak value systems. And if you compare that to civilization and modes of economy and overcoming barbarism, where the state is thinking in 1836 to the value systems of Native Americans, very much oriented towards conservation and nature and the environment. So leading with values, there's a lot of people say, let's adapt materials to be culturally relevant when possible. That's important. But I really think that it's important to lead from culture as well. And that's how we truly value people is, you know, working alongside of them to be able to lead from their own culture, to honor their creation stories, their teachings, their grandfather teachings, the 4 R's of Indigenous research, respect, reciprocity, relevance, and relationships. Relationship with community, land, being good relatives, original instructions to guide us. So, for instance, in our cultural teachings, when we make a handicraft for first time, like I crochet a lot. I love to crochet. And anytime I try something new, whether it's a piece of clothing or a stuffed animal, whatever the case may be, that first time that I try something, I give it away. And that's so we're not as attached to our own focus as an individual, but rather to the community around us. So you'll see Native Americans do that, whether they're making baskets or beadwork. The first time that they make something, they give it away. And I think that these are ideas that are begin to be handed down to us from generation to generation. I actually like to think of this more as 7 grandparent teachings than grandfather teachings. I mentioned my Swedish grandmother who taught me to pray and who taught me to do the right thing no matter how difficult it was, to tell the truth, to be honest. And my Menominee grandmother, who worked so hard to bring her children back to her out of boarding schools and the orphanage that they were sent to when their father died. She worked so hard. And when I think of her, I think of bravery and love and tenacity, sticking with it. And no matter our background, I think that we hopefully have all had people in our lives who've loved us and wanted us to be the best people that we could be. So whether they're parents or teachers, mentors, grandparents, other extended family members, there are values that they instilled us that we bring out into the world with us today. So I thought in honor of Valentine's Day, I was hoping that you would kind of reflect on that question of your ancestors and the values that they passed on to you. And if you would be willing to honor one of your ancestors and pass and mention a teaching that they would have passed on to you in chat, that would be wonderful. Yeah, Roy, braiding sweetgrass is really wonderful illustration of Native Americans and relationship with the earth. And I have enjoyed it on audio book as well. It's I think really something that is meaningful to many people. Yeah. Grandmother Quinn, humility, respect for history, measuring with love. No teaspoons or tablespoons. There is a dash, a taste, a flavor, a handful. My grandma seal, as you're talking about measuring and cooking here, my grandma seal used to bake bread, and she would let me help when I was little. And so my little hands would be in there kneading with her. And she would often, as she was kneading, she said that she was kneading love into it. And she would talk about people she was thinking of and prayers that she had for them and hopes that she had for them, so that as she was making the bread, she would, that was kneaded and baked right into the bread. Respect and how to love. That's great. Florence modeled patience and forgiveness. True North. Um, and you turn to her when you need to reset your attitude. Grandpa Michael, quiet gentleness, while working with a team of horses or grandchildren, the value of family traditions. Really good. All right, we are at about time, and that was kind of it for me. If you'll indulge me, I would love to play this video for you, though. Is that okay? It's just a few minutes. It might take us past our time. If you need to leave,
For
go ahead
calling the
and leave.
spirit back from wandering the earth in its human feet by Joy Harjo. Put down that bag of potato chips, that white bread, that bottle of pop. Turn off that cell phone, computer, and remote control. Open the door, then close it behind you. Take a breath offered by friendly winds. They travel the earth gathering essences of plants to clean. Give it back with gratitude. If you sing, it will give your spirit lift to fly to the stars, years and back. Acknowledge this earth who has cared for you since you were a dream, planting itself precisely within your parents' desire. Let your moccasin feet take you to the encampment of the guardians who have known you before time, who will be there after time. They sit before the fire that has been there without time. Let the earth stabilize your post-colonial insecure jitters. Be respectful of the small insects, birds, and animal people who accompany you. Ask their forgiveness for the harm we humans have brought down upon them. Don't worry. The heart knows the way, though there may be high-rises, interstates, checkpoints, armed soldiers, massacres, wars, and those who will despise you because they despise themselves. The journey might take you a few hours, a day, a year, a few years, 100, 1,000, or even more. Watch your mind. Without training it, it might run away and leave your heart for the immense human feast set by the thieves of time. Do not hold regrets. When you find your way to the circle, to the fire kept burning by the keepers of your soul, you will be welcomed. You must clean yourself with cedar, sage, or other healing plant. Cut the ties you have to failure and shame. Let go the pain you are holding in your mind, your shoulders, your heart, all the way to your feet. Let go the pain of your ancestors to make way for those who are heading in our direction. Ask for forgiveness. Call upon the help of those who love you. These helpers take many forms: animal, element, bird, angel, saint, stone, or ancestor. Call your spirit back. It may be caught in corners and creases of shame, judgment, and human abuse. You must call in a way that your spirit will want to return. Speak to it as you would to a beloved child. Welcome your spirit back from its wandering. It may return in pieces, in tatters. Gather them together. They will be happy to be found after being lost for so long. Your spirit will need to sleep a while after it is bathed and given clean clothes. Now you can have a party. Invite everyone you know who loves and supports you. Keep room for those who have no place else to go. Make a giveaway, and remember, keep the speeches short. Then you must do this. Help the next person find their way through the dark.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm trying desperately to exit out of this presentation. Stop share. How about if we do that? Okay. Thank you. Thanks for staying. It's 2 after now. I've kept you after class, and I really appreciate all of you and listening today and all of your lovely comments in the chat. Um, Wawanan Katananamua. Thank you, everyone. Wawanan. And
Thank
I'll
you
stick
so
around if you have any questions. I'll stick around for a little bit. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Annie, for your presentation.